Welcome back to Business 140, Personal Financial Planning with Professor Joe Lane. We're in the twin chapters on credit. Unit 2, which we're in right now, are chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8. We did chapter 5, the car and the automobile and that sort of thing. Chapter 6, we looked at open account credit. This is credit that you get from a bank credit card or from a retail type of organization, a Kohl's or a Dillard's or something like this. I'm not going to go back and redo chapter 6. I know you're saying thank goodness. I mean, you've already covered that. I did mention, and I want to say it two different ways. Is it okay for personal financial planners to use credit cards? And the answer is yes, and we talked about in chapter 6 the reasons. Why is it that you do not want to use, and I ask you to be familiar with this, what is the wrong reason to use credit card? Well, I made the statement, I think, in chapter 6, for you to live beyond your means. For you to buy on credit stuff that you really can't afford, and then sooner or later that all comes crashing down on you. And I'll even go a little bit, let me put it another way too. To meet your basic living expenses. I mean, if you can't meet your basic living expenses of food, shelter, utilities, transportation, and clothing, and you have to supplement just your basic living expenses with a credit card, you know that's bad. You know you don't want to do that. You've got to be able to increase your income, do some things to keep that from happening. So I guess you could say to meet basic living expenses or living beyond your means are reasons you don't want to use or have to use a credit card. You say, well, so how do we keep from doing that? Personal financial planning. Personal financial planning doesn't solve every problem, but you are so much better off if you do personal financial planning as you go through your life, go through your career. Okay, chapter 7, consumer credit. It's a particular type of credit. Now here's the difference. In chapter 6, open account credit, you got the credit, then you went out and bought. Consumer credit is credit that you use for a particular purchase. When you go out and you purchase a vehicle, you're using consumer credit. When you go out and buy new appliances, consumer credit. When you go out and purchase, if you're a four-wheeler, consumer credit. You buy a piano, consumer credit. Thinking, well, you get the idea. Now here's what we say. Consumer loans, we're talking about consumer credit. Consumer loans are made for specific purposes, usually formula negotiated contracts that specify the borrower's term and repayment. So I want you to start off this thing with consumer credit. What we're doing, we are making consumer loans. So why do they call it that? Because it is consumers, that's us, making specific loans. Let me go back and read this again, and you will see how it's different. Because here you buy the item and then you finance it. The item first and then you finance. Consumer loan made for specific purposes using formally negotiated contracts that specify the borrowing terms and repayment. How does this differ from chapter 6? How does this differ from open line credit, retail credit cards, bank credit cards? They are formal negotiated contracts. It's a contract and you sign a document. Usually they're one-shot transactions. You go out and buy appliances. You go out and buy furniture. You go out and buy something else. No credit card or checks are issued. It's where you go out and purchase something and you buy that particular purchase on credit. And it's usually where you borrow money for big ticket items. Consolidation loans. I always frown when I talk about consolidation loans. What are you consolidating? If you're consolidating your debt, that's kind of scary, but maybe you need to consolidate it, okay, and get it at a lower interest rate. So you need a consolidation loan. But if you consolidate your debt, then don't increase your debts again. Like, don't start using those credit cards and overusing them. Okay, enough of that. But there's a number of different types or reasons that you would use, and we all use consumer loans. Different types of consumer loans. Okay, so I just want you to know what a consumer loan is. It's the first thing in your Chapter 7 handout. Now he goes back again, and I didn't write it in here, but he talks about collateral. We talked about this in Chapter 6, but let me mention it again because I do want you to be familiar with it. When you do a consumer loan, you almost always have to pledge something as collateral. Collateral is something, an asset, something of value that you have that the person who's letting you borrow the money from them, the lender, can get to satisfy that debt in case you don't pay it. And almost always the collateral is going to be whatever it is you're borrowing the money for. If you're borrowing money for a piano, the piano is going to be a collateral. If you're borrowing money for the car is going to be the collateral. So I think we pretty much understand what collateral is. Now, a consumer loan can be a single pay loan or it can be an installment loan. Now, most consumer loans are installment loans. If I go out and I buy, I guess the best one we can use is I go out and buy a car. Well, I finance that car for 60 months at a certain interest rate and that sort of thing. And that's, you know, that is an installment type loan. I pay monthly installments for that. But sometimes might I do a single pay consumer loan? It's possible. Let me give you an example. I'll give you a hunting example so you guys can, ladies, well, I'll try to think of a better example for you maybe in a little bit. Now that doesn't mean that ladies don't hunt. Not going to go there, I won't get myself in trouble. So let me just give you the example. All right. I need a new four-wheeler for deer season. And I'm in sales. I sell a product. And I always, at the end of the year, I get a commission on what I've sold. So I know at the end of the year, I'm going to get a commission or a bonus. But I need that four-wheeler in at least June, because I've got to go out there and start working on my deer stands. I've got to start cutting my shooting lanes. I've got to start feeding the deer. I got to start doing all that stuff. So I need it in June. But I'll pay for it in December, because when I get my commission, I'll be able to pay for it. So here's what I may do. I'm going to do a single pay. I'm going to come in there and I'm going to say, look, I need to borrow $8,000 for my four-wheeler. And I will pay you $8,000 December plus interest. That would be a single pay consumer loan. I'm not paying installments. I just want the money. Now usually a single pay is not going to be more than a year. I mean, if you could let those things go forever, I'd go out there and buy that Corvette we talked about I'd buy the most expensive Corvette they had, and I said, look, I'd like to do a single pay loan, and I'll pay that single pay loan back to you in 1935. Probably not going to be really worried about paying that back. All right. So single pay loans usually for a year or less. All right. So most consumer loans, and you know what a consumer loan is, they have collateral pledged against them, and you're familiar with what that is. And it can be normally an installment an installment payment, so much per month for whatever period of time you've made the loan, or it could be a single pay loan. Where can you get consumer loans? The best place to get a consumer loan is with a bank or a credit union that you have established a relationship with. We've talked about that before. You need to have a banking relationship with a or several bankers and banks. And when you have that banking relationship, you have a checking account, you have a savings account or a CD. You've established that relationship with them. You maybe borrow some money for them, pay it back, borrow some money again, pay it back. You're a good customer of theirs. And so you're going to be able to get a good consumer loan with them and probably get it at a good interest rate. Commercial banks, consumer finance companies, credit unions, savings and loans associations, we don't see many of those very often. Sales finance company, life insurance companies using your cash value. We may talk about that one day, but don't worry about it. Friends and relatives. Now, I'd like for you to be familiar with some of the places that you can get consumer loans. Okay, I've got them listed for you. Friends and family. What do you think about that? Is that a good idea? I hope you're saying no, unless. Now, here's how you can do that. If you really want to do it. I'm Joe, and my uncle is Fred. And I go to Fred and I say, Fred, I really need about $5,000. I got some things I got to do. Fred gives me $5,000. A couple, 2 or 3 months later, Fred says, hey, what about that $5,000 you owe me? I owe you? Fred, I thought you gave me that. I'm your favorite nephew. I thought you gave me that. That's where you can get into problems with that. So here's the deal. If you really want to lend money to a relative, or if you really want to borrow money from a relative, make it a business transaction. Put together a contract. Here's the amount. Is there going to be any interest? Here's when it's going to be paid. You're going to make, Uncle Fred, you're going to make me sign a contract? Well, Joe, are you going to pay it back? Well, sure, then sign that contract. All right, okay. So enough with that. You just kind of have to be careful when you do start borrowing money from friends and relatives. That can be a problem. Probably not the best way to be doing negotiated formal consumer loans. If you're doing personal financial planning, that really shouldn't happen very much at all. All right. But I would be familiar with some of the places you can get consumer loans. Let's see what else. There's something that you're not going to be able to see. Well, maybe you're going to be able to see. I don't know. Let me look. But I'll tell you what it is, but I'm going to put it up. I'm going to put it up to your face too. As soon as I get back on camera, after I have found it. There is something called a Federal Truth in Lending Disclosure Statement. I'm going to go behind the camera for a minute. Let me just look and see what's... Yeah, we can kind of see that. I mean, not that you have to read any of those things, but you can see where it says Federal Truth in Lending Disclosure Statement. When you do a consumer loan, the person giving you that loan will provide you with a Federal Truth in Lending Disclosure Statement. Are they doing that because they're a really good guy or a really good gal? Well, the answer to that is maybe they are, but they're doing that because the law requires them to do it. What is a Truth in Lending Statement, disclosure statement? What does it disclose for you? It discloses the amount of this loan, this consumer loan you're taking out. What's the total amount of cash that you're going to end up paying, and what is the annual percentage rate? Remember when we talked about credit cards, they have to show you what the annual percentage rate is. Each month when you get your statement, it's going to be on there. Well, on consumer loans, they will provide you with the Truth in Lending disclosure statement. They're required to do that. And it shows the total cash out that's going to be paid, and it shows the annual percentage rate. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. A couple of other things he mentions here, right down towards the bottom. I don't think it got cut off of your sheet. Prepayment penalties. You get a consumer loan. You take out a consumer loan to buy something for a period of time. But you end up with money available to pay off that loan. So let's just say that you have a consumer loan, and let's just say that that consumer loan is at 9%. Okay. But and the loan was for $6,000. Okay. Then, for whatever reason, somehow or other, you end up with some money available that you could pay that loan off. You say, okay, this $6,000, is there any place I can invest this money right now where I know I can get a 9% interest rate? The answer is probably no. So probably the best thing for me to do is to pay off something that I'm paying 9% interest on. So I'm going to take that money and I'm going to pay off that loan or whatever portion was left. A prepayment penalty says if you pay off the loan early, we're going to charge you a penalty for doing it. You don't want to get a consumer loan from anybody that will say that you're going to have a prepayment penalty to pay that loan off early. You should be allowed to pay that loan off early. And most any bank or credit union that I'm aware of, they have no prepayment penalty. I mentioned to you one time that the vehicle that I drive is a GMC four-wheel drive pickup truck. We have my wife has an SUV, but I bought a vehicle, gosh, it's been about 6 or 7, 8 years ago now, that I found on the internet. But it seems like I always like to kind of have another vehicle kind of just to have fun with or whatever. So I bought a 2004 Thunderbird Roadster, which is a Thunderbird hardtop convertible, and I bought that vehicle from a family out in Georgia, and we drove out and got it and brought it back home. And like I say, I guess that's about 6 years ago, and it's a black Thunderbird convertible. It's really a good-looking vehicle. I enjoy it. I drive it occasionally. I've done parades with it and homecomings and all that kind of stuff. And it's just a fun vehicle. Don't drive it a lot, but it's a neat vehicle. Okay, why did I bring that up? I remember distinctly when I bought that vehicle, and I went to get a consumer loan on it. I wanted I got a 4-year consumer loan. Car loan. But I distinctly remember that I intended to pay it off within about half that period of time. And I had budgeted for it, part of personal financial planning, all that kind of stuff, and I had budgeted extra. I didn't want to pay it off all at one time when I bought it. I wanted to finance it, but I financed it for 48 months because I knew that was fine, but I was going to try to accelerate it up to 24 budgetarily, and we did, and we paid it off. Well, if there had been a prepayment penalty on that, it'd been like I'd have to pay extra money to give them their money back sooner. So you don't want to have a prepayment penalty. I think that's most of the things about consumer loans. Consumer loans are just a special type of credit. They are formally negotiated contracts for a particular purchase. And normally, whatever you're purchasing is collateral for that particular purchase. I think the only no in this chapter was, I want you to know what a consumer loan is. Be familiar with, I wanted you to be familiar with what collateral is. I wanted you to be familiar with single payment and installment payments. I want you to be familiar with what prepayment penalties are. I want you to be familiar with where you can get consumer loans. And then I want you to be familiar with that loan disclosure statement. A loan disclosure statement is a statement that the lender has to give you when you do a consumer loan. And what that loan disclosure statement does, it shows you the cash that you're going to be paying out and the annual percentage rate. We are getting ready to change gears pretty quickly here for chapter 5, 6, 7, chapter 8. Chapter 5, we bought the house, we bought the car. Chapter 6 and 7, we've been talking about credit. Credit is necessary. Credit is good. Utilized properly, credit can help you build your wealth. So we're going to get them. Now we're going to start talking about insurance. I've got to go put my little diagram back on the board to get ready for chapter 8. So a loud clap for my executive producer, Ryan Pierce. We have finished chapter 7.